guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Bree if you are new here, and in today's video I want to do kind of a beginner's guide to eyeshadow application. So we're going to do pretty simple eye look today, neutrals, a little smoky on the outer corner, all matte, very simple, but just like what I would recommend to a beginner to get comfortable and get good at doing eyeshadow. So if you guys want to hang out and get some tips for eyeshadow application, then just keep on watching. Okay, so myself personally, I always do my eyeshadow first for a couple of reasons. Reason number one, it gives my SPF as much time as possible to sink into my skin before I start putting primer and foundation and everything like that on top of it, so it all sits a little bit better once the SPF is really sunken into my skin. And the other reason is that it's a lot easier to clean up if you make a mistake, if you get eyeshadow underneath your eyes. It's a lot easier to clean up if you don't already have foundation or concealer or whatever already on your skin. So I always recommend to do eyeshadow first, at least until you're really comfortable doing it and you know that you're using a palette or an eyeshadow that doesn't have any fallout, or you're really good at making sure you tap off all the fallout. Once you're seasoned, it's up to you. I still personally prefer to do my eyeshadow first. Like I said, again, biggest reason is it gives my SPF the longest time as possible to really sink into my skin. So the first piece of advice that I'm going to have is that eyeshadow base is just as important as what eyeshadow you're using, how you're applying it. Eyeshadow base is going to be the thing that's going to help the eyeshadow stick to your skin and keep it on for as long as possible without it creasing or fading or anything like that. So my personal favorite is the MAC Paint Pots. So this is in the shade Soft Ochre, and I like to just take kind of like a dense brush like this. I'll pick a little bit up and just cover up my entire lid space, basically from brows to lashes. I love this one for a ton of different reasons. Reason number one being that it's not sticky or tacky or anything like that. Like, it's once it sets, and it sets rather quickly, once it sets, it's just a nice matte base, but it still holds eyeshadow onto it really, really, really well. Another reason why I really like it is because it does cancel out the darkness and the veins that are on my lid. That's mostly just a personal preference though. Some people say you can just use concealer. Other people prefer to use the eyeshadow primers that are clear and really sticky. Some like to use really, really brightening ones, especially if you're working with color. A really bright, like almost white one could be really beneficial if you're working with color and you don't want your skin tone to impact the way that that color is reading. There's a ton of different uses and a ton of different styles for eyeshadow primer. This one's just my personal favorite. And with that being said, I don't personally ever really have an issue with like my own skin tone affecting like colored shadow. In the future, you guys want to see a beginner's guide to colorful eyeshadow, let me know down below. I would love to do that as well because I love wearing colorful eyeshadow as well. But neutrals are really the building blocks. It's where you should start. It's where you should get the most comfortable. It's also some of the easiest to work with at first. Okay, and then once my eyeshadow primer is on and it's set, because again, no matter what you're putting on your eyes as the primer, you do want to give it a couple seconds to set down so you're not just like putting powder immediately on top of like really, really creamy product. So once it's all on and set, I like to take a setting powder, whatever setting powder matches my skin tone, because a lot of times I could say like, oh, you know, just grab one of the shades from the palette that you're going to be using and do that. But I feel like when I say setting powder, like 9 times out of 10 people have a setting powder that's going to match their skin tone, so it's kind of a foolproof way to say just like use a powder that matches your skin tone pretty much. But I like to take a setting powder that matches my skin tone on a big fluffy brush, and I'm going to set down my brow bone. And the reason that I like to do this is because it does just make everything blend so much easier up at the top. It's just going to help create a nice smooth blend. And I don't want to take my, brown eyeshadows all the way up to my eyebrow. So I just like to set it with something that matches my skin tone, and then we'll start working on the eyeshadow. Speaking of setting down your primer, if you're working with very, 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 very pigmented eyeshadows, or you're a very beginner, like you're really honestly just learning how to do eyeshadow, I would actually recommend taking that setting powder and setting your entire lid. It's just gonna help everything blend a little bit better, and it's just a little bit easier. It's just gonna help everything blend a little bit easier. I like to leave my lid space unset because I like to kind of pack a little bit of that shadow onto that unset primer to help it really last throughout the day. As you practice more and more, you'll get better and better at blending on an unset primer. So for today, I'm going to be using the ColourPop Gone Matte palette. So this is a perfect, just all matte, all neutrals. And I'm going to be working entirely in this second row right here. You don't have to use this exact palette to achieve this look. Any neutral matte browns that you have will get the job done. Okay, so I'm going to start out with this really small fluffy brush. As you can see, relative to my eye, it's quite small. And I'm going to go into the second from the bottom shade, Fleecy, and I'm just going to tap my brush in just a couple times so you can see how much is on here, and I'm going to actually take my finger and just kick a little bit of it off. We don't need all of it. And I'm going to start out by pressing and kind of packing this onto my outer corner. So I'm not sweeping or swirling yet. I'm just kind of tapping in once, tapping off some of that excess, and then pressing it into my skin where I want it. So one of the kind of like default eyeshadow styles is dark on the outer corner, light on the inner corner, and then a little bit of definition in the crease. So we don't want to take this up too high. So as you can see, it's up a little bit higher than my crease, but the biggest reason why I have it up a little bit higher than my crease is because, as you can see, when I look straight forward, my eyes are actually two different levels of hoodedness. So this eye has a fold in it, whereas this one has just like a regular crease. So I have a fold and a crease on this side, whereas this side is just my brow bone crease. So I like to overextend past my crease just a little bit to make my eyes look a little bit bigger and also to make them more even. So once I have it kind of generally where I like it, I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other side. I have never been the type of person who's ever been able to do like one eye fully at a time and then go back and replicate it. I find that it's much simpler to recreate, like copy paste back and forth, than it is to try to do one eye and then make sure it's even on the other, if you know what I mean. So obviously we're not blended at all at this moment, but we're gonna stop right there with that shade. And then I'm gonna grab a small, slightly fluffier, as you can see, blending brush, and I'm going to literally go one shade up. So the next shade up, which would be Blanky, and I'm going to pick up a little bit on my brush, of course, tap off some of the excess, and then I'm gonna start just slowly doing circular and back and forth motions over the top edge of where I just had Fleecy. And I'm also starting to slowly drag this color into my crease and like kind of inner corner area. And I'm gonna also take just a little bit of Blanky and I'm gonna do right where Fleecy ends on my lid, just to kind of make that a little bit more of a seamless transition. Back and forth, and circles. And that already looks so much more blended, right? Repeat the same thing on the other side. And then next up, I'm gonna go in with an even larger, but still fluffy brush. And I'm going to go, again, one step up into the shade Shaggy. Pick some up, kick some off, and I'm gonna do kind of the same thing that I just did, but take this over the top of Blanky and just nicely blend everything out up on the top. This would be considered to be your transition shade. And so when I say transition, it's transitioning from the eyeshadow to your natural skin color. So aside from your brow bone setting shade, this would be the lightest shade in your look, except for, you know, whatever you do on your crease. Or except for obviously whatever you do on your lid, that could be much lighter, but for the like definition portion of the eyeshadow, this would be the second lightest shade. And then what I like to do, just to make sure everything is really soft and really blended, I like to go back in with my brow setting brush and the same powder that I used to do that. I pick a little bit up, and then I'm gonna go back over my brow bone and the transition once again. And this is going to lighten up a good portion of the look, but you can see the difference between how soft the blend is on this side versus this side. This side's still really nicely blended, but this side just looks a little bit more soft, a little bit more polished. And it's okay if you get some on the darkest parts, that's okay, because what I'm gonna do is now, instead of working darkest to lightest, which is going to ensure that you have the most pigment on the outer corner, because the more shades you start to layer, if you work lightest to darkest, you're going to have a very light outer corner, which is fine. It's just not gonna have as much pigment because it's not going to be sticking directly to the primer. So rather than working darkest to lightest, now I'm actually going to go lightest to darkest and just kind of re-intensify everything. So I'm going to start out with my transition, and then into my crease shade, and then into my outer corner shade. And if after you do your outer corner shade, you need to go back in with like your crease shade or your transition shade to just make sure that that outer corner shade's really nice and blended, by all means. It's just a lot of back and forth. But honestly, once you get in the habit of it, it's really quite easy. So now I'm looking at myself up in my viewfinder, my monitor, and I'm feeling like I want the outer corners to be just a little bit darker, just a smidge. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this really, really tiny pointed blending brush, and I'm gonna go into the very bottom shade, Powder Puff. And I'm gonna pick up just the tiniest amount. You can't tell because it's a dark shade on a dark brush, but I'm gonna pick up the tiniest amount. I'm still gonna kick it off, and I'm gonna focus this on my very, very outer corner. Immediately kind of applying it in small circles so it just kind of fluffs itself into being blended. And then last but not least, for my lids, I'm gonna put on a matte. You could put on a shimmer if you want to, but I'm feeling matte today. So I'm gonna take this brush that's flat, but still a little bit fluffy, but still flat. And I'm gonna go into the very top shade, Teddy. I'm gonna pick some of that up, and I'm just going to start pressing this onto that open space. And I'm kind of using back and forth motions towards my crease to kind of make sure everything's nice and blended. And I'm making sure that I am putting the majority of the product in my inner corner area and then kind of slowly fluffing it out from there. Last but not least, I'm gonna take my transition shade, and I'm gonna take just a little bit of that and kind of just marry where those definition shades and that lighter lid shade meet. Okay, so that's the first little bit. I will link up in the eye and down below for you guys my winged liner tutorial, just in case you're curious. It kind of breaks down what I do after this step. So I'm going to go put on a little bit of a wing, clean up underneath my eyes, get my face like mostly done, honestly, to the point where I'm ready to do my under eyes, and then I will be right back. Okay, so I have my face a little over halfway done. My makeup's a little over halfway done. So I'm gonna finish up my under eyes. So my under eyes are gonna be pretty simple. Back into the ColourPop Gone Matte palette, of course, And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with a brush like this. So a really, really small, just kind of flat shader brush. And I'm going to go into the shade Fleecy. And I'm making sure to pick up the shadow on the top edge. So I don't have it on the sides or anything like that. I have it on the top edge. And I'm going to start out by just ever so slightly brushing back and forth on the outer corner of my lower lash line. And I'm going to stop right about in the middle. And sometimes I like to take a little bit of this shadow and kind of flick it up with my wing. And then I'm going to take that same pointed blending brush that I used earlier on that very dark shade, and I've honestly, I gotta talk through it. I swirled the brush off onto my like washcloth that I have right here, so it's completely clean. And I'm going to go into the shade Blanky. Very, very tip, like keeping it on the absolute tip of the brush. And I'm going to angle this so it's just the tip touching. And I'm going to, again, kind of slowly swipe back and forth and just use Blanky to blend out Fleecy. So there's a little bit of definition underneath my eyes, but it's not too strong. I'm going to grab this brush right here, which is a very, very tiny blending brush. And I'm going to take a little bit of Shaggy, run it under the very bottom edge just to lighten it up just a little bit more. I am doing like barely touching my skin with any of these brushes. And the reason for that is that it's a lot easier to disturb concealer and like your setting powder underneath your eyes than it is to disturb like an eyeshadow primer. But there we go, nice and soft, very cohesive with everything else. So there we go, nice and soft, but like still very cohesive with everything else. So I am gonna go finish up the rest of my makeup now, and I'll be back to show you guys the final look. Okay, so this is the final look with everything all finished up. Obviously, lashes are not required, neither is a wing, honestly. Just do whatever you want. But I wanted to give you guys some good, just like basic tips for how to apply eyeshadow, and I hope that you guys learned something today. Like I said earlier in this video, if you guys want to see a beginner's guide to colorful eyeshadow, let me know down below. I would love to do that as well. Comment down below with any questions, any other tips, anything like that. Make it a whole conversation in the comments. Please subscribe if you have not already. It would mean the world to me. Like this video, ring the bell, do all the things. I hope that you guys have an awesome, awesome day, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye!